In this module, we will talk about types of fermentation. We talk about first what will be the definition of fermentation process again, because that is very important to learn about different types of fermentation. As we know that fermentation is a process of mass culturing of the organisms, especially microorganisms, for the sake of desired product. As we know that there are different type of organisms can be used in the fermentation process, and each and every organism requires different cultural conditions, oxygen supply, temperature, etc. And then we can produce different types of product by this process. So as vary the product, then in a literature, different terminology is used for different type of production. So before we talk about that, we have to decide that what will be the criteria that can be an important base for the classification of fermentation process. So in this slide, you can see here that there are 7 different possible criteria which we can use to classify the fermentation process. First of all, as concerned the first criteria, that is oxygen need. Different organisms require oxygen, some organisms not require the oxygen. On the other hand, some processes need oxygen and some processes does not involve the oxygen supply. In the second step, you can see here the moisture or a water content in the medium. We all know that water is very essential for the life. So in the cultural condition, the amount of water present in the media is very determinant for the types of fermentation, and also have a very critical effect in fermentation process. As concerned the third criteria, that is the production scale. Fermentation on the base of scale can be classified into different types. We will talk about in detail in the later modules. And then is a process. Fermentation can be handled by different processes. So process of fermentation can also be the base of types of fermentation. So the fifth criteria which I have mentioned here, that is the state and the mixing. So you know that culturing of the microorganism require different nutrients, and during this growth, mixing is very critical. That is necessary for the sufficient and equal supply of all the nutrient to that microorganism, and even the distribution and the dilution of the toxic compound produced by those microorganisms while growing. On the other hand, it also helps for the oxygen solubility and also help to release the gases produced during fermentation process. So the sixth criteria that is mostly reported in different literature, that is the products. As the product change, different scientists use the types of fermentation with respect to the product, which we discuss later on in a later modules. And the last, which is also base of the type of fermentation in the literature reported, that is the organism. So as I already told you that different kind of microorganism can be used in fermentation process. As we vary the organism, then that will be the new type of fermentation. So these are different 7 bases for the types of fermentation on which we can classify this critical process of fermentation. So in later modules, we will talk about separately all these bases and what are the different types of fermentation. So when we talk about any particular fermentation process, that can include different type of fermentation in a single process, which we will talk about in detail, each and individual type of fermentations. So, as concerned the types of fermentation, if we look into the detail and we want to make the summary about any fermentation process, then it will be very easy to define a process. So, if we classify and then we describe any process in detail of fermentation, then it will be very easy to describe any process.